We have quite a few speakers, so it might be tight on time. If we do have time, we could probably take questions between speakers, but otherwise we'll wait till the end and I may just move us forward. All right, I am hitting record.
I just hit it, so
Yep,
it's
great. Awesome. Thanks for doing that. Okay. Welcome to our third Tribal Drought webinar for this summer. My name is Stefan Tangent. I'm a Tribal Resilience Liaison for the North Central region. I work directly for the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance, and I work in coordination with the North Central Climate Adaptation Science Center. I'm hosting this webinar from the traditional lands of the Ute, Arapaho, Cheyenne, and numerous other indigenous peoples in Denver, Colorado. The Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance is a nonprofit intertribal organization that serves as advisory committee to the Great Plains Tribal Chairmen's Association on all matters related to technical and policy issues regarding the water resources of member tribal nations. If you want to learn more about the Water Alliance or the Climate Adaptation Science Centers, you can go to their websites, and I'll post those in the chat here in a moment. The goal of this monthly webinar series is to provide information, tools, and resources for tribal resource managers to use in addressing climate change. This summer, we're focusing on drought, trying to bring resources to you about regional and local impacts, resources for addressing drought, and information that's useful both near-term and long-term. Today, we have folks from NOAA, Fort Belknap, Indian Community, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and NOAA NIDIS. This webinar series is being done as a collaboration with several organizations. From NOAA's National Integrated Drought Information System, or NIDIS, we have Britt, Parker, and Molly Wolishin. At the USDA Climate Hub, Danelle Peck from the High Plains Regional Climate Center, Crystal Stiles and Natalie Umflett, and Doug Kluck from NOAA's National Center for Environmental Information. So just a little bit about NIDIS before we get to our presenters. NIDIS was established in 2006 by public law with a mission to improve the nation's capacity to proactively manage drought-related risks by providing those affected with the best available information and resources to assess the potential for drought and to better prepare for, mitigate, and respond to the effects of drought. NIDIS is building the foundation of a national drought early warning system through the development of regional DEWs, where networks of partners and stakeholders share information and actions that help communities cope with drought. For a deeper dive into resources, such as up-to-date and historical data regarding drought, I recommend checking out NIDIS's website. The National Drought Mitigation Center, National Integrated Drought Information System, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture Climate Hubs are working with states, tribes, and others across the country to collect condition monitoring observer reports on drought. It's also called CMOR drought, including photos. Your impact reports help us understand how drought is affecting local conditions and you. State officials and U.S. Drought Monitor authors review these reports to help verify what indicators are showing and to identify areas that need more attention. You can also check drought impact reports for your area. If you are in Montana, you can use the Montana Impact Reporter in the same way. Learn more by following these links, which we'll put in the chat box as well. So yeah, just a note, if you have questions, please post them in the chat box. We'll either answer them as we go. If there's time, we'll wait to the end, at which time you can take yourself off mute and ask in person if you like. Our first speaker today is Doug Kluck. Doug is the Central Region Climate Services Director for the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. Doug's from Nebraska, but's lived in Kansas City since 2000. I'm gonna stop my share, Doug.
Oh, good. Now I can do it.
And you're good to go.
How do we look there, Stefan?
You look good.
All right. So am I sharing my screen with everyone? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
All right. So I just got this picture. First of all, hello, everybody, and good morning, good afternoon. I just got this picture from Montana. I want you all to look very, very closely at it. It looks like peas, right? Those are, harvested peas. But what else is with the peas? Yep, those are grasshoppers. So that's one of the issues that we're running into, and I guess it's ecosystem-based problem with both agriculture, kind of a cross between agriculture and ecosystems colliding, if you will, especially during drought years like this year. So there's plenty of grasshoppers to go around. You know, sort of tangentially, I've heard, and I'll get into what I'm supposed to be talking about in just a minute. I've heard that baby pheasants love to eat grasshoppers. So weirdly enough, at least in Minnesota and parts of South Dakota, they're starting to think that they're going to have a great pheasant crop this year because it's been dry. So just a little side note for everyone there. Anyway, those are harvested peas. They didn't get very many. They're small. Those are in Montana. But for every pea you get, or for every 100 peas, you get one grasshopper, apparently. So anyway, I'm going to give you a little bit of a roundup on what's been going on in the climate. I know you all know what's been going on for the most part. It's been hot and dry, but these are the numbers, I guess you could say, that we're dealing with in terms of temperature and precipitation over the last 90 days. Image on the left, any shading of yellow to sort of orange is above normal in terms of temperatures, and this is 90 days. So 90 days ago, believe it or not, it was the end of April, and since then we've seen a propensity of warmer than normal temperatures, especially in the upper Missouri Basin, Montana, Wyoming, Dakotas. A little bit cooler as you go to the lower part of the basin in Kansas and Missouri. Precipitation sort of is in a similar vein. You see percent of normal precipitation over 90 days. In some cases, less than 25%. Less than 25% when it should be the wettest time of the year for places, again, in Montana, Wyoming, and the Dakotas, stretching into Minnesota for that matter. So those orange and yellow sort of areas are below normal in terms of precipitation as well. There are a few places where it's a little bit wetter, Front Range of Colorado and portions of Missouri. The last 30 days, not 90, but 30 now, we're looking at even more departure, if you will, from normal temperatures across Minnesota. That red area in Minnesota on the left, all the way down to, again, the Dakotas and Wyoming. So it really hasn't gone anywhere, the heat and the dryness. And you can see on the right-hand side of this image, again, where it's yellow, orange, red, that's below normal precipitation for that period. Yep, there are some places that got some rains here and there in the last 30 days. Those are in green and darker kind of blue, purple colors. But those are pretty small areas, and you know, this is the time of year now until I don't know, September or something, where we don't get a lot of precipitation, or it's really spotty. You can get big precip, but it's pretty localized. This is an image of sort of a modeled view of soil moisture and how soil moisture is lacking, I guess you could say. Not surprising, with above normal temperatures, below normal precipitation, you have it's a great demand for moisture in the soil, and this is going down to approximately 100 centimeters, which I don't know, I haven't figured that out, but somebody can do that calculation. Let's just say 30-40 inches down into the 40 inches down into the soil. So pretty dry in all those areas that we just talked about. Here's streamflow outlook, or not outlook, sorry, streamflow condition as of yesterday. And I threw in the source red because I wasn't sure who would be coming from that neck of the woods, but also all of the Missouri Basin. And again, where you see sort of brown and orange colors, that's below normal in terms of flow. And there are some issues. There are some issues in terms of water intakes. There's probably some issues with too warm of water for fish and stuff that others will know a lot more about and talk about later. But generally, you can see where the browns and tans are, we're low, very low on water. Blues tend to be above normal. And yeah. So now we're going to shift to the outlooks over the next few slides here. And this is the outlook for the next 7 days. And this came in this morning. So this is more or less through August 3rd, about a week from now. So if you add up all the rain that could happen over the next 7 days, this is what you get. And don't be fooled by those light greens. That really doesn't matter. Light green is just saying there's a chance of a tenth of an inch or less, which doesn't really, at this time of year, doesn't really do any good at all. What you want to look at are some of those blues, darker blue colors, because there is a hint of getting some rain across southern South Dakota. Well, first of all, let's look at Colorado and Wyoming. Good chances of decent rains in that area. Good and bad. The bad is a lot of that precipitation could fall on burn scars, and where it burned so much last year could cause some major issues, especially in Colorado, and is causing some major issues already in Colorado. And then there's that stripe that comes out of Wyoming across South Dakota and into northeast Nebraska. Now that could be a good rainmaker if you happen to be in that. So cross your fingers and hope that develops. I would say, you could be 50 miles or 100 miles north or south of that, and still you could be in the zone of getting the rain, because this is not exact where this rain is going to be falling over the next 7 days. Well, let me go back. A lot of areas not getting rain, note. North Dakota and Montana for the most part, where they need it the most, one could argue. This is the week 2, so August 3rd to the 9th. Temperature and precipitation outlook on the left, where you see that tan to sort of orangish color. Those are higher probabilities of being above normal in terms of temperature. It's pretty much the center of the country, the plains, all right, from all the way from Texas to Canada. And again, in the Northwest as well, the highest probabilities for being above normal temperatures. And if you're above normal temperatures in August, that's pretty warm, all right? On the right, you have image of where the precipitation is sort of predicted to be, and yes, there's a hint of above normal in sort of far western Montana, where it's kind of green there, and it looks like near normal and that'd be nice. Near normal is a lot better than what we've had in the plains, northern plains there, and so we'll take it if we can get it. But we'll see what happens. Again, this is only for that week 3 through 3 or 3rd to the 9th of August. Just want to throw this in here just for a hazard statement. Over the next week or so, in that time period we just talked about, they're talking about some pretty excessive heat from Nebraska south to Louisiana. Probably not. I don't know how many folks are on here from that area, but anyway, I just wanted to point out that there's a pretty good chance of Omaha, Kansas City, all the way down to Louisiana, being pretty darn hot. Slight chance of that being pretty darn hot, or all the way around that as well. So just wanted to point that out. Looking at the month of August, not great. Temperatures on the left showing a pretty high probability of being above normal for the entire, if you average out the whole month, and over almost the entire northern part of the country, especially in Montana, Idaho. And then below normal in terms of precipitation up in that same area on the right, the probability is a little enhanced for having below normal. Just where you don't want it, I know. And then in August through October, sort of a similar pattern in terms of above normal temperatures on the left. Higher probabilities of being above normal. All that orange and tan areas is above normal. And then on the right, slightly leaning towards dry across pretty much the entire west into the plains in western Great Lakes. For those 3 months, that's the forecast for the moment. Then a drought update. On the left is the drought monitor map. I didn't include the whole legend here, but basically where it's red and dark red, that's what we call D3 and D4. D4 is more or less historic. Once in 50 years, you see it that dry, hopefully. It shouldn't happen very often. D3 is more like once in every 25 years it gets that dry. I think there's going to be more expansion of those colors, those dark red colors over the next week or two, next month or two. And then the image on the right is sort of how things have changed over the last 12 weeks. And Where you see yellows and oranges, it's gotten worse. Where you see sort of light green colors, it's gotten a little bit better. In some cases in Colorado, a lot better. But for the most part, not much better over time. Here's the wildland fire outlook as of July 1st. I think this will be updated next week, August 1st or so, showing in those red areas, and a lot of us are in those red areas, that's above normal fire outlook. You already have some fire outlook every year. It gets dry this time of year and you have fires. But this is above normal. So they're really keying on that area. In August, on the left, all that red area for the whole Northwest, all the way to Minnesota. And then in September, sort of shaving that back, but keeping that core area there from the Black Hills, basically straight west to the Pacific Ocean. There's the key points. I've probably taken too long. I won't go through this. All these things I just talked about in terms of short-term temperatures, precipitation, and long-term. More or less, I hate to say it's looking better than it did a week ago. It is slightly better, but not much. So we're going to continue having issues with wildfire smoke, water quantity and quality, and long-lasting heat issues. And the different sectors like ecosystems, agriculture, recreation, health are all going to be impacted. And I think I better stop there. We do have a webinar. It's open to the public. A number of different tribes get on this. This is focused on the north central part of the U.S. On August 19th. We're also going to have one that Molly is going to tell us about in the short term. We kind of ramp up our webinar activities to keep people abreast of the situation. I think on August 5th, and Molly can tell us for sure, and she'll give you the registration, how to register for that webinar as well. And it's just a way to get sort of what I just did, in terms of the outlooks and where we are and all that business. So anybody's free to come to those. Thank you. And I will stop sharing.
Thanks, Doug. And Molly just put the registration for that webinar in the chat. So if you're interested in that, definitely please join
And
us.
Molly, would you put the August 19th one in chat if I can't before you?
Yes.
I'll try and grab it real quick.
Yep. No, I can do that. No problem.
All right. Dennis, can you hear me? And
Yes, I can hear you.
great. So our next speaker is Dennis Longknife. Dennis is the climate change coordinator at Fort Belknap, and he's long been involved with wetlands, fish and wildlife, and fire there at Fort Belknap. Dennis, take it away.
You bet. First of all, I'll show you these pictures that he bring up. This is of one of our main perennial streams that come through the reservation and join with the other streams, but it's dried up already. It's just pools of water here and there, but at least it's providing drinking water for the livestock in the area. And as you can see in this picture, I don't know if you can see them there, there's four baby Canadian geese that were living under the bridge we didn't know about, but their parents are gone, but just the baby geese are there. And go ahead. This stream goes through a road that cuts across the middle of the reservation. It's called Brown's Creek to your left here, and Little People's Creek that comes out of the mountains to the right. And they are also dried up streams that are pooled up too. And our streams began drying up at the end of June from the drought we're in, I'd say. And like Doug said, things ain't getting any better. They're gonna continue to get worse. So our tribal council and our producers and irrigators are having meetings all week long to address this problem, and working with federal and state agencies for assistance. The FSA is here, and the tribe is having a week-long drought meetings every evening in the communities to try to get more help and come up with some plans on what to do. Last couple of days, I've seen semi-loads of stock tanks going by my office here They're making stock tanks out of tractor wheels. They're making stock tanks out of culverts. Anything they can do to make stock tanks and get them out there to the livestock. And go ahead. This is the lower People's Creek, and it shows that the cattle are hanging tough to these pooled up areas of water. There's also some native minnows that live in these streams, and I'm thinking about another week or two, these areas are going to be dried up as well. So that's why we're scrambling around trying to get stock tanks out to these sites and then have some water tenders deliver water out there to them. And that's another problem. It came on kind of a little bit too fast for our planning, but access roads to get stock tanks to the cattle is a problem because some of these roads are very rough, and if you drive heavy equipment, it has impact on undercarriage and the struts and the shocks of these big heavy equipment that take the roads to get to these sites. Go ahead. This picture shows a CRP field and on a reservation, and as you can see, there's only stems left on there. This impact is from the grasshoppers that are in Phillips County, and part of our reservation is in Phillips County and Blaine County, and in both of our counties, the grasshoppers did a really a lot of damage to the farmers, hay, ranchers. Things are pretty bad situation here. Go ahead. And this is another CRP field, but it's on the eastern or the western side of the reservation where the impact's really bad. It shows a CRP field, and we got permission to cut the CRP for emergency efforts, but the CRP is too short to cut in this area. And just over the hill here where you can't see, actually, it must have got a good little rainstorm that passed through, and it was actually tall enough for them to get about 100 bales of round bales of hay off of it. So those bales are quickly getting sent to get used. But in this area, yeah, the CRP is too short to cut. Go ahead. And this is also on the western boundary of the reservation. Every one of these hills got a concrete stock tank that was developed years ago from droughts we had in the 50s and 70s and 80s. But they haven't been used for so many years, and all of a sudden this year they're getting reused again and developed, but they got no grass. They might have water, but now they don't got no grass, as you can see here. The grass is maybe 1 inch high at best. So yeah, getting feed to these cows is the next thing. Go ahead. This area is in the northern part of the reservation. It shows in a buffalo pasture for our buffalo. This dried up beginning of July. Luckily, we got 2 more reservoirs that are a little bit deeper. They're supplying water to them now, but their water turned blue-green. So I've been monitoring the site and just went out there last week, and there's several waterfowl species utilizing the water, so it must not be bad. So go ahead. And this is a close-up of one of the drainages that usually has a little bit of water in it, good enough for wildlife to use, but it's dry. It was dry since June, so go ahead. And this was last week. I took this picture this weekend, but last week we got a little reprieve. We got a little rainstorm that came through, and it didn't fill in the prairie potholes, but it managed to fill in little depressional areas with water. And when I drove around this site, I noticed that the prairie dogs and the buffalo were walking to this site to drink the water. So go ahead. And this is that other reservoir I said that was deeper. at the buffalo pasture, and there's pictures of some ducks and the babies right there in the middle that are utilizing the water. And I noticed when I was out here, it's really quiet. Usually you hear grassland bird species singing their songs all over out here. The western meadowlark, the horned lark, mountain plovers, long-billed curlews. None of that out here. Go ahead. This is the site I was telling you about that's deeper, that's providing water to the buffalo now, since all the other water sources are dried up. The water you can see used to come way back up here, but it's dried out now. So actually the buffalo herd was just over this hill. I should have took pictures of that for you, but they have their babies with them. The bachelor buffalo bulls were right over this dike on the other side. They seem to like to stay separated from the rest of the herd. And they roll around out there creating big clouds of dust. They like to roll around out there in that dry dirt. But go ahead. And this is the buffalo pasture showing part of Snake Butte, one of our cultural sites. And this again is a dried reservoir, but you can see the surrounding prairie dog towns. They used to have burrowing owls, long-billed curlews. The curlews come here to nest and breed, but there's no habitat for them. So, and then I noticed there's no burrowing owls in this area. So, yeah, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah, I got some more narrative here I could talk to you about. Some of the problems, the native grasslands. We had a late cold spell in April and May that kept our native plants from beginning their growth, as our topsoils were frozen to an extent. When the grasses did begin their growth, we also had no measurable precipitation. So only several species of native grasses managed to mature and put on seeds. Most other grasses and crops were going dormant at the end of June, which is hardly never heard of. They usually put on growth for another solid month or two. Our grasslands are very short. However, the most resilient species seem to be thriving, just a few of them. Well-established bunch grasses in general were the ones that are well adapted to this arid environment because their roots go down several feet. Our field crews are echoing the same observations they see firsthand. We got an active grassland restoration project going on here on a reservation, going on in its second year. It's developed by Christina Eisenberg from the Society of Ecological Restoration in partnership with Oregon State and the BLM, and Wendy Vellman, a state botanist for the BLM. The project's main task was to conduct native plant monitoring using the BLM's AIM plot method of sampling. And it was this group that first opened our eyes to that grasses weren't producing seeds and they're stunted. And because the main phase of the project was to end up collecting seeds for future restoration efforts. And yeah, so they got to see the brunt of the extreme weather events we get here in northern Montana. A little update on the agriculture farming part of it. The tribe officially made a drought disaster declaration in June 2021. As the drought progressed from spring to summer, we found ourselves not prepared, much like the summer of 2017 when we were in our other flash drought. But I guess we were a little bit more prepared this time because you've seen how it could get. Soon our grasses and crops were not providing adequate yields, and most crops were stunted or unusable, much like those pictures I showed you. Livestock had to be, livestock's, I think they're still trying to save their livestock, but they're going to probably have to be sold at some point. Grasshoppers started emerging in June, probably earlier than that, but so far this summer, we had grasshoppers that devastated our producers' crops and grasslands. Our tribe is already working with APHIS. I wrote this a couple of weeks ago, so this already happened, but there was 7 airplanes in the air 2 weeks ago spraying for grasshoppers here. So we'll find out next year how successful this was. They ain't able to spray the entire areas, as they have to skip every other swath when they spray, and they also have to stay away from water bodies or communities. So there's going to be areas where the grasshoppers are still going to emerge. But anyway, as other weathermen and climatologists in the state east and west of us, Tanya Franson and Aaron Peters, Michael Downey, those guys keep us abreast on what's happening on both sides of us. So it's good to know. And they also said that there's a blister beetle out there now that's starting to impact the cattle, because the cattle eat these vegetation that's got the blister beetles on it, and it causes blisters on livestock's esophagus, stomach, kidneys, and heart. And in severe cases, death can result. So like I said, our communities have been having meetings every evening now for this week, trying to come up with some more drought assistance. Tonight, I'll be attending one of those meetings. The Tribal Council and the BIA, I might want to add, is assisting in any way they can. Yeah, it's pretty quiet out there on the prairie because all the birds ain't around here. There's no water for them to nest and breed. So all our migrating waterfowl probably went farther north. And that's about it, Steph.
Thanks, Dennis. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We can address them at the end. Our next speaker is Melissa Castiano and George Jordan. Melissa is the Native American liaison for the Mountain Prairie region for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Melissa is Danae from Northwest New Mexico, and she's worked for the service since 2002. Immediately after Melissa, George is going to go ahead, and George is the project leader of the Montana Fish and Aquatic Conservation Complex in Montana. George has worked for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for 30 years in Montana and the Dakotas. And during his tenure, he's primarily focused on supporting tribes with their fisheries management, working with partners on habitat restoration efforts, and conserving declining aquatic species. Melissa, you want to go ahead?
Sure, thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, you sound good.
All right. So yeah, it's Melissa Castiano Yanisha. Nakai Dedan Doshin Bashin. Atini Dasha Chain, Nakai Denan Dasha Nella. Hello, my name is Melissa Castiano. Like Steph said, I'm from Northwest New Mexico, from the Navajo clan, which in turn we call ourselves Dene in our own language. I just introduced myself in a traditional way, which is we are a maternal society clan system. So I just introduced a lot of my Mexican clan. I'm born for the Sauk clan, and my paternal grandfather's clan is the Mexican clan, and my maternal grandfather's clan is a Red Running Into Water clan. And that's how we introduce ourselves on our nation, to see if we have any relation or anything like that among ourselves. The running joke on the res too is also, if you're hitting on each other for dates or anything, it's hey girl, what's your clan? So you guys are not related. So it definitely takes away the incest part of that. So that's a little bit about me and my tribe. So I am the Native American liaison, and next slide is a little bio about me, in which he just introduced me as well. So next slide after that, please. So what I do in my position is do travel engagement and relations for the Mountain Prairie regions as a whole. My vision in this unique position is to create better working relationships with tribes, especially from a tribal perspective. How do we be respectful? How do we make meaningful relationships? And the first step is also just recognizing that Native practices and cultural traditions that we bring to the table, and acknowledging the way that that way in which the service has conducted business in the past does not necessarily reflect the priorities and practices of the tribes. Coming from the res, we know we have bigger issues, a lot of more than just science a lot of the times, and that's what I always have to think in perspective when we do our work as well. So as long as always maintaining those respectful relationships and understanding where tribes come from, instead of pushing our agenda on them, It's kind of like, how do we work with them as partners and as sovereign nations and recognize them that way? Next slide, please. So a little bit about this. This is just an example slide of what I present to our biologists in the regions of how they can better engage and work with tribes, what they should look for, if they have questions. A lot of them are always nervous and they don't want to offend a lot of tribal nations. So they always come to me for guidance and expertise of how we can do that. I always say I represent my own tribe a lot of the times, so I don't try to assume other tribes and like we don't share the same customs or language or anything like that. So I'm always like seeking to enhance my knowledge of tribes, especially in the Mountain Prairie region. I'm very familiar with the Southwest regional tribes, but I'm always in the learning basis as well. So I love this part of my job as well, because I also learn with other tribes and try to see the opportunities to connect on the same mission of conservation of threatened and endangered species and their habitats, especially for our future generations to enjoy. Next slide, please. So wanted to present a couple of things that we can help provide to tribes. And one of them is the biggest one, the Tribal Wildlife Grants System, which we call TWIG. It provides competitive funding for federally recognized tribes to develop and implement programs for the benefit of wildlife and their habitat, including species of Native American culture or traditional importance and species that are not hunted or fished. Next slide, please. So the TWIG grants are provided to use as technical and financial assistance to tribes. And it's unlimited on what they can do as long as it's for the benefit for fish and wildlife resources and their habitat. Like I said, it's a very competitive grant system, but we've had a lot of successful tribes apply and do some great work, especially with black-footed ferret, bison, and a lot of other like fish species. So a lot of things like that. I'm not going to go through all of what it could be used for. You can just read it here. But the one thing though is land acquisitions are not allowed under this, but anything else that's related to the conservation of fish and wildlife species, including salaries, equipment, consultant services, subcontracts, goods and services and travel, those are some of the examples under that. And yes, I can share a link for the Tribal Wildlife Grant Program. And also I can help connect you if you're within the Mountain Prairie region of our states with our Tribal Wildlife Grant coordinator who could be more inclusive in answering a lot of your questions. And I can provide that at the end of that, in the chat later. That's what I forgot. Next question. Or next slide, sorry. Another program we provide for tribal engagement and enhancing is working with tribes and helping us partner in our efforts to fight against illegal take of wildlife and the trade associated with that crime. So we work with our partners, the Native American Fish and Wildlife Society and the Bureau of Indian Affairs Law Enforcement to host a week-long intense training program for tribal officers. This has been going on for 25-ish years. So it's a 40-hour in-service training. And like I said, it strengthens our working relationships and also provides our tribal partners with the equipment and the knowledge they need to help in stopping those kind of people who want to do illegal take of wildlife. Usually the training is held in the summer. It's been on and off for the past couple of years due to COVID. So hopefully within the next year, we would have more advanced notice of when they would take place so we can alert tribes of this opportunity. So COVID has definitely taken a lot away from our planning with tribes as far as being respectful as well, that we don't want to get people sick and be the cause of that. So just being cognizant, it's just always that iffy thing. So, but next year, hopefully we'll be on full blown. Next slide, please. All right, this is my favorite one, and this is regarding our Native Youth Program. I used to be the coordinator for this at NCTC, our National Conservation Training Center out in West Virginia. And if you could please click on the link on the Native, it should be sending you to a page. So what this program is for our Native youth to increase their awareness of opportunities as a biologist, and we introduce them to other federal agencies as well. If you can scroll down, please. It was developed more as a, it started out as a climate change community congress, but just being respectful of the change of administrations and stuff, we were doing it toward the community adaptation and leadership for the kids. They do bring a lot of knowledge, and they are from across America, American Samoa, Hawaii, and Alaska. Sorry about that. And Alaska, and just the mass of knowledge across, and also what climate change can bring, and the stories they share among at that young age is such an amazing experience. And so I wanted, before my time is completely out, wanted to play this video. If you want to scroll down a little bit, Stefan. Yes, and we'll start here. Is there sound? No sound? Oh. Is there any way to play the sound?
I don't know. I tried taking myself off mute to see if that would work, but if you're not getting sound, I don't know. We can also just share the link if folks want to watch it on their own.
Yeah, it's true, but okay. Yes, if anyone has the opportunity, it's a 2-minute video, and this is one of the greatest things for our Native youth to engage in. So if anyone is out there and wants more questions about this program and the application process and et cetera, and what that entails for the next year, I would be happy to help answer your questions and connect you with the right people at NCTC. All right. I think that is the end of my presentation. I've given you a brief overview of what the tribal program does for our tribal partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Can you hear me? This is Dennis Longknife calling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm aware of your program here, and I try to get our students and youth involved in that leadership thing, but I just can't get the interest stoked up here. So might be reaching out to you again.
Yeah, and any way I can help engage or talk about it, and I wouldn't say like sell it, but it is kind of a scary thing, especially with the kids that come across. They do need that support system with their people, and we do get a lot of homesickness and a lot of that. But once they're there and they get that empowerment that they traveled on an airplane and they're going to like through DC and going to West Virginia, and they do all these. They meet all these kids from across, like other natives from across the country, and share stories, and then they start getting comfortable. And it's just like, it's kind of a transition period for them before they go to college. And once they're there, they'll definitely be like, this was the best thing I've ever done, and thank God I did it, kind of thing. And it's definitely, when you're there, you kind of get reinvigorated of why I did to do what I do for Fish and Wildlife Service and for tribes. So yeah, definitely reach out to me if you want me to help out on that.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Dennis, for that comment. George, how's your audio? Can you hear us?
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
All right. Well, so far, it's not been a really encouraging scenario laid out for drought and temperatures. And, when you're working with fish species that are complete obligates of having water, it sets up kind of a tough scenario. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about our fish and aquatic conservation program in interior regions 5 and 7. And I focused mainly on our offices that are in the Missouri River Basin. So we've got our regional office in Lakewood, Colorado. I think that's actually where Melissa's stationed. And then we have a scattering of fish hatcheries and fish and wildlife conservation offices across Wyoming, the Dakotas, Montana, who provide support to the various reservation lands. Okay, next slide. So real briefly, our National Fish Hatchery Program is about 150 years old, and it's a system of hatcheries that have been set up to work with tribes, states, private landowners, and other partners to help maintain healthy and self-sustaining populations of fish and aquatic species. And one of the roles our hatchery has, working with our Fish and Wildlife Conservation offices, is to evaluate what opportunities there are on tribal lands for either restoring declining species or to help maintain sport and recreational opportunities, defining those species, what the parameters are, and then producing those species for subsequent stocking. So next slide. And then our Fish and Wildlife Conservation offices mainly are the boots on the ground management biologists that work with our tribal partners. They're the ones out doing the actual physical sampling of habitats. And so from about the late 1800s, this really has been one of the core missions of the Fish and Wildlife Conservation offices, is working with tribes, our private landowners, states, and other government agencies to conserve fish and wildlife. Some of the work we do mainly is focused on providing technical assistance to tribes, mainly the fish and game departments. In the Dakotas, we're seeing more of an uptick in invasive carp species. We have the methods, the capability, and expertise to help tribes monitor their waters to see if fish are moving up, invasive fish are coming up out of the Missouri and into some of the tributaries. We also work with our tribal partners for restoration and recovery of declining and imperiled fish stocks. And as well, we work with our fish habitat partnerships and our National Fish Passage Program, where it's applicable to help restore habitats to conserve tribal aquatic species. Next slide. So this was kind of just a 30,000 foot overview of the types of things that our program does. And here's just some contact information. So in Montana, you can reach out to me, or my number's on the screen. For the North Dakota office, I would reach out to the Missouri River Fish and Wildlife Conservation Office. And into South Dakota, the Great Plains Fish and Wildlife Conservation Office, or you can always reach out to our regional office for additional information. So we covered that pretty quickly, trying to be cognizant of time. So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, George. And our next speaker is Britt Parker. Britt, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me okay?
We can. So Britt is the Regional Drought Information Coordinator for NOAA NIDIS. Britt's based out of University of Colorado at Boulder. Go ahead, Britt.
Thank you very much. I know we're running out of time and I really want to give people time for questions. So I'm going to make this very short and sweet, but I wanted to make everyone aware of a federal funding opportunity that is currently open called the Coping with Drought Competition, Building Tribal Drought Resilience. And you can go to the next slide, Stefan. And Molly, if you don't mind, or I can do it if you can't get to it, but there's two ways to find these this funding opportunity. One is through the Climate Program Office website at NOAA, and you see the cpo.noaa.gov/funding-opportunities. Next slide. Or you can also go to the drought.gov site under drought research and coping with drought competition, and we'll put those in the chat box so you can access them easily. Next slide. But I really wanted to focus in, we do have a competition on ecological drought, which I think could perhaps also be very relevant to this group, but I really wanted to focus in on the Building Tribal Drought Resilience competitions. So we are looking for applications that are developed by or in full partnership with tribal nations to fund the implementation of actions together with some research on those actions to build drought resilience that is contained, or these actions are contained in existing plans and strategies. So plans could include but are not limited to things like drought contingency plans, drought water or natural resource plans, agricultural resource management plans, or climate adaptation plans. Next slide. And this is just a kind of list of, again, not limited to, but examples of activities that could be implemented. I'm not going to read through them in the interest of time, but all of this information is in the information sheet for these competitions that you can access on either of those web pages. Next slide. We are a applied research program, and so we do need to require that there's some research aspect of the project. And so again, I'm not going to read through these, but there's a set of 6, I think maybe 7 example types of research questions that that could be tackled through the project. Next slide. And then you can go to the next slide. And so we have a total anticipated fund for $1.5 million for this competition. It is a 2-year competition, and we anticipate awarding between 5 to 7 projects with funding up to $500,000 to be expended over the 2 years through cooperative agreements. And these projects would start September 1 of 2022 after the grant process and review process. Next slide. I just want to quickly highlight a couple super important guidelines for applicants. Again, the proposals will demonstrate full partnership of tribal nations by including at least 1 full investigator on the project representing a federally recognized tribe. There's a long list of what we would consider a good integrated project team, and I'll just note that this can include tribal colleges and universities, as well as intertribal councils and consortia, tribal allotee organizations and citizen groups as part of the team, in addition to kind of your more traditional or perhaps what are traditional kind of grant programs that focus on, academic institutions. Next slide. I also just wanted to highlight that we want the proposals to demonstrate adherence to the guiding principles of tribal engagement from NIDIS that includes respecting tribal sovereignty, ensuring trust and reciprocity, and ensuring the drought-related work is culturally appropriate and useful for tribal nations. And finally, if the activity is to take place, on the ground, in the water, we will have to go through the NEPA process. So just highlighting that we will need to have some information about the project to be implemented. Next slide. You can just skip over this. There's more eligibility. That is all in the notice of federal funding as well as the information sheet. And again, here's just the websites for where you can find the full proposal. And the last thing I wanted to say, which I realize I didn't include in any of the slides, is that the letters of intent are due August 9th, and then the full proposals are due October 18th. So we're getting close to the LOI deadline, but please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, and I'll wrap up there. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Britt. Yeah, if anybody has questions for any of our speakers, feel free to take yourself off mute, or you can put them in the chat, whatever is easiest. And we'll keep on past the hour if folks want to ask more questions. So don't worry about the timing.
Stefan, I just wanted to add that on Doug Kluck's earlier presentation, he showed a map with that looked like a Santa Claus stocking, where it's really in the D4 category. We're right on the edge of that also, and we're between the D3 and the D4, as is the rest of eastern Montana, some of the areas. But anyway, temperatures are expected to be 100 to 110 degrees today, tomorrow. This heavy smoke we got from the fires to the west of us is actually doing good. It's keeping the temperatures a few degrees cooler. So and also the impacts are not only from the drought and grasshoppers, I forgot to mention we had 3 hailstorms that did a lot of damage to our berry crops and some ag fields in certain sections of the reservation. And a tornado that came through and actually filled up a couple reservoirs with with water, sorry. A tornado that had a downspout of rain and filled up a couple of reservoirs. It was crazy. Hey, that's all.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dennis. And somebody had a question about the recording. It will be on our YouTube channel. I'm going to put that YouTube link into the chat for those that want to.
Yeah, and then Stephanie, I was just
that.
going to mention that NIDIS on drought.gov will have a webinar recap. So I will put all of the links and information in that recap. So that is sent out through the Missouri River Basin dues listserv if you're interested in getting that information.
Great, thanks, Molly. And this recording will be up later in the day today. And if it's not up today, then tomorrow for sure.
And I was just going to put in the chat box, if you are interested, if you're not already on the Missouri River Basin dues listserv, the link to subscribe to that.
Thanks, Molly.
Mhm.
Any questions, comments for any of our speakers? All right. Well, thank you to all of our speakers, Doug, Dennis, Melissa, George, and Britt. And thank you to all of the attendees for joining us today. And we'll probably be doing another webinar towards the end of August to wrap up our drought summer webinar series. So stay tuned for that information to come. Thanks again, and have a wonderful rest of your week, everyone.